So our first review of the week is the Deer King.
The Deer King.
Yes, not to be confused with the Deer Hunter,
Or for that matter, the indie video game The Deer God.
Yes.
So this is one that came to Netflix recently. I have actually owned a copy of it for a bit because back before Best Buy stopped carrying Blu-rays, I would just periodically go, oh, well, I have X dollars worth of credit stored up. Let's go peruse the anime DVDs for anything interesting.
Yeah.
Now, this is a fairly recent production, which is why it's qualifying as our new movie of the week. The anime came out in 2022, and it's based on a novel series.
Yes, and I'm unfamiliar with the novel series. I'm assuming it's like a YA fantasy.
I don't know if it's necessarily YA, but it's a Japanese fantasy novel.
Okay.
Came out as 2 volumes.
All right.
There's a manga version that I haven't seen it on sale anywhere, so it may not have gotten a localization. Now, what's interesting about this one, well, actually, there are many interesting things about this one, but Daniel, I think you mentioned having this sort of weird deja vu with the art style too, but you couldn't quite place it.
Yeah, I went and looked it up, and the studio that did this movie also did Kaiju number 8. So that was where I was kind of like looking, because I was really looking at some of the character designs. I'm like, that looks really familiar, and then I went and looked it up and went, yeah, okay,
Yeah, this is just a higher quality animation than that show had.
yeah,
Also, so the director is a gentleman named Masashi Ando, who is a veteran animator. He worked for Studio Ghibli from 1990 to 2001, which means that he was the animation director and character designer for 3 of the 4 anime films in the top 5 box office revenues for Japan of all time: Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, and Your Name.
wow,
So that is that is an excellent pedigree. So this is
yes, it is, yeah,
a main directing title.
oh yeah, 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 and it's I will say, I guess I could talk a little bit about the animation, since, but I mean, the animation's really good. I mean, it's you know, from a technical standpoint, yeah, it's very well done.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything that I even have to really criticize it for.
Yeah.
No, yeah, like you said, just the animation is very nice.
Yeah.
It's mostly very fluid. You aren't really too confused about what's going on unless you're supposed to be confused about what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. There are parts of the story that are like a little like, what am I supposed? What's you're a bit like Towley in South Park. I have no idea what's going on.
You want to get high?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, I guess we can get into the story.
yeah. So this is actually, I did have one thought on the animation.
Oh, okay.
So what I will say is that the guy is very good at what he does. I kept kind of thinking that I was seeing like visual similarities to previous movies he'd worked on, but I didn't necessarily see like there's like a certain je ne sais quoi that I wasn't sure was there for a lot of it. You know what I mean? It's like everything was
Yeah.
competently framed. You could tell what was going on, but like there wasn't a whole lot that really just like hit home. You know, it's like nothing went, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'll just give a shout out to the now Oscar-winning movie we reviewed last week, Flow. There were a lot of shots in that one that are still with me 2 weeks later. Where this one, I watched it on Saturday and like, like I remember what happened. I remember the characters, but there aren't like a lot of what do you call it? Money
That
shots, I
that
guess.
yeah, yeah. There aren't a lot of like, oh wow, that was incredible. Yeah, kind of moments. Yeah.
Yeah, like it operates at a solid A for technicality, a B for composition and whiz bang.
Yeah.
You can definitely see the same sort of visual elements as from some of the previous movies he's worked on.
Yeah.
I, I almost wondered if this was a Ghibli film before I even knew about it because of the way that he was drawing some of the liquid effects. Like Studio Ghibli and liquid effects are like, I don't know, rice and soy sauce.
Yeah, yeah. They like their liquid effects. Yeah, I remember that from Boy and the Heron. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah. But yeah, let's get so animation wise, unimpeachable, just not amazing.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, to get into the story, it's it takes place in this fantasy realm where you have these two different kingdoms, and the names of the kingdoms are escaping me at the moment.
Uh,
Um,
to the internet.
yes,
Uh, Now, what I will say is that the two kingdoms are, in my mind at least, are very clearly supposed to be loosely patterned on like the big kingdom is medieval China, and then the small kingdom is like Inner Mongolia or like one of those steppe peoples, like border peoples.
yeah,
Let's see here. Okay, so the China analogy is the Empire of Zol, and the smaller kingdom was Aquafa, not Aquafina. Important difference. But
yeah.
although, not gonna lie, I didn't listen to the English dub for this one. If I'd been in charge of direct casting for that, I would have had like Aquafina come to do a line just as a joke of one of
Yeah,
the characters from Aquafa, but I'm demented like that.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't watch the English version either. I watched the Japanese with subtitles.
Yeah, and I think that is a good choice in this case.
Yeah,
Because okay, this is just my personal experience with this type of deliberate anime movie. We'll talk about
yeah,
the pace in a second, but um, the even though I don't speak the language, that Japanese voice track is part of the aesthetic that makes it feel different than a usual movie, and that does tend to add a little bit of interest to it. Plus,
yeah,
since a lot of scenes in this are a little deliberately paced, it does give your eyes something to do.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, and, but yeah, so we got these two kingdoms, Zol and Aquifa, and the Aquifa kingdom has basically kind of ceded control to the Zol Empire, and as a result, they've enslaved a lot of the Aquifa people, and we start off in this salt mine, and
Which, boy, is that an awful job.
yeah, yeah, and we meet our uh, hero of our story, Van, who's enslaved in this salt mine, but then during the when he's been put in the box because he stood up to one of the guards, and during the midst of this, the salt mine is attacked by these werewolves, kind of black wolves, who have this like kind of mystical quality to them.
Yeah, they've got this weird liquid purple aura, which what it actually is. This movie has an interesting relationship with magic versus realism
Mhm.
because like the underlying one the big underlying mystery of this is what the black dogs are carriers of this plague, the black wolf fever.
Yeah,
And by the way, if you're squeamish, do not watch this movie because there's a lot of dog bite wounds. There's a lot of uh, leakage from said dog bite wounds
Yeah.
as the fever takes effect on people. And the weird phenomena is that the natives of Aquifa seem to be immune to the fever, while the Zol occupiers are always taken down by it. And the presence of this fever is actually part of what kept a small sliver of Aquifa free-ish, and it also is probably what kept them from being completely wiped out and brought the empire to the bargaining table.
You're right. Yeah. Um, and of course, things get even take an even stranger turn when the little girl that you see there, she gets bitten by one of the wolves and is about to be taken away, but then Van stops the wolf, and but even as Van gets bit, they discover that he's immune to the wolf bite, and he suddenly starts getting these like nature powered type powers, basically.
Right. He can basically he can interact with nature. It's kind of like a very pantheistic view of it, where like all of nature is interconnected, and he can see that connection and play with it. Almost a
Yeah,
bit like the Force, actually.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's like
Um,
Eastern mysticism is well known for its complete ripoffs of George Lucas. So
yes, yes.
definitely
It's
not the
all
other way around.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so Van and the little girl, what was the girl's name? Yuna.
Yuna.
Yuna. Yeah, they escape the mine, and then they go off and on their own. And then we find out that of course then they come across a deer, and he can actually ride this deer.
Yes, and in this world, the people of Aquifa have a what seems to be a lost talent for taming and riding these deer, which had a particular name, but I cannot remember what it is off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't remember. I want to say it started with an E.
Yeah, we'll just call them the deer going forward,
Yeah, yeah,
because it's basically like they are kind of reminiscent of reindeer,
yeah,
insofar as the males and females both have antlers, which does make sense for a riding deer. Although I don't think there is a deer in reality that you can reliably ride on. As my
yeah,
memory serves, they're called reindeer because you use them to pull a sled.
yeah, yeah. Um, Hence
See
Santa
Santa
Claus.
Claus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. um,
so, so, uh, so at this point, you have a few threads going on. You've got a character who I can't believe he wasn't a villain, who is this doctor with the Zol Empire who's trying to uncover the real underlying cause of the wolf virus or the wolf fever.
yeah, because there's a lot of superstition going around that it's like a curse.
Right.
Yeah,
Um, Meanwhile, you've got so he's trying to track down our heroes.
yeah,
Meanwhile, you've got some machinations with. I believe that the one guy with the mustache is like he's like a local prince who kind of collaborates with the Empire.
yeah.
At least I think that's what he is.
That sounds about right. Yeah,
He's either that or a occupying general of some sort, but I wasn't entirely clear.
yeah,
And yeah, he's trying to he's trying to take Van down because he thinks that this is going to be a threat to the Empire's power. You've got the Emperor who's showing up for a visit. Um, you've got a a woman who is like a expert tracker who's working with them to try to bring them in, and she's a Aquifa as well. So yeah, it's like mixed loyalties.
yeah,
I will say this is it's a pretty rich fantasy world. They've put a lot of effort into the different cultures there because like the Zol and the Aquifa definitely feel different.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
There's a lot of history from the war. Like a lot of the Aquafa men have Zol wives because they, as a part of the peace treaty, they intermarried.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, we see that with this village that Van and Yuna end up living in, uh, and one of the things we find about Van is that he's actually from this tribe of people called the what was it, the Lone Antlers. Is that right?
Something like that.
Yeah. Um, and
Like a lot of fantasy novels, there were a lot of nouns flying around. So
yeah, yeah. um, and so that's how he knows how to ride a deer. And and of course, then you have the whole thing with him, the relationship with him and Yuna, where like it's very obvious that she's clung on to him and sees him as her father, even though he's not really her father.
right,
Uh,
and he is. I kept thinking how similar he was to what's his name from Gladiator.
Maximus.
Maximus. Okay, I wanted to say Maximus, but I also didn't want to sound stupid.
Yeah,
But yeah, because he just went off to war and his wife and son died,
yeah, yeah,
and so he was kind of snuffed out until he met Una. So she kind of saved his life too.
yeah.
And so the crux of it is that at one point Una gets kidnapped by a bunch of these black dogs, and so it's the quest to save Una.
Yes, yeah, and and the black dogs have their own uh, world that they live in, their own little kingdom that you find out about later on, and yeah,
Eh, Right. I believe that it was like either the capital or a major city of the old Aquifa Kingdom that's
yeah,
been occupied by some stragglers, including uh, a strange madman wizard who basically commands the dogs. And that was one of the things that struck me as kind of weird was that for a movie called The Deer King, it's kind of funny that weren't they calling him like the Wolf King or the Dog King? Like, isn't that what the Black Dog King, something like that?
yeah, yeah. The yeah, some like yeah, Wolf King, I think was what it was. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
I thought that was kind of funny that he wasn't technically the Deer King. Like he was a deer rider, but that's like
yeah,
like they were trying to pressure him into taking command of the dogs and driving the the Zol out of the kingdom.
yeah, yeah,
Like this is very much like if I was to put this in European terms, this would be like it would be like set in Roman England or Roman Britain or Roman Britannia. They're the proper term for it. And
yeah.
this is like a bunch of local Bretons trying to um, run them out
Right. Yeah.
using the old ways of the Druids. Nobody knows about the Druids.
Stonehenge.
Okay, glad I'm not the only one who thought of that.
Yeah.
Um, so as far as like the actual pacing and plot go, this had I've noticed that a lot of Japanese fantasy anime adaptations do tend to have a pretty deliberate pacing to them.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name of it now, but there's some show about 10 years ago with this spear woman protecting the emperor's son that was just crawled.
Oh, yeah. I know the one you're talking about. Yeah. Can't remember the name of it. Yeah.
So it's much more tolerable as a movie than as a TV show,
Yeah.
just because by the nature of a movie, things have to happen on some sort of timetable. Like, come on, come on. The landscape is pretty, but it ain't that pretty. Go.
Yeah.
Um, I think I enjoyed it much more than I didn't.
Yeah.
I would say that if you tried to watch the Lord of the Rings a- anime movie that came out last fall and couldn't get into it, this is basically what I think that movie was trying to be.
Uh, okay.
It's just because it's not beholden to being part of another franchise. It could, it could tell the story it wanted to tell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was, I mean, yeah, like you, I kind of enjoyed it more than, more than I didn't. I although it was a little hard for me to kind of keep up with the all the different factions and all the different people and everything.
I think I was about 45 minutes in before I really understood who was who at the zoo. So,
Yeah, yeah,
um, and mind you, this is a guy who played Final Fantasy 13 and managed to figure out what they meant by fal'Cie and less'Cie relatively quickly. So it's
yeah.
um, so like the cast is all good. Non-spoiler thoughts, I would say that if you don't mind a fairly slower paced anime movie, it does have a reasonably satisfying ending. It is well done. Like it's not as visually amazing as some of the Studio Ghibli movies that are in the same genre,
Yeah.
but and I'd even say that Lord of the Rings movie had a few more neat spectacle scenes than this one does.
Mm.
It's just that this movie is more coherent. And there, okay, so like, remember that scene in the mist,
Oh, with the
the
people in
stilt walkers?
the still, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like ultimately that scene could have been cut, but that's one of those things where if you're reading a fantasy novel, which is like a series of adventures as they get from point A to point B, I
yeah.
think that would have fit in better. But for like a movie with a limited runtime, it's like, oh, are there still people going to come back at some point? No,
No. Yeah, yeah,
it's just a thing that flushes out the world.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was disappointed too when they didn't show up again. Like what was the point of them being in there? Yeah,
I like stories.
yeah,
Yeah, I think I would give this one like a firm B minus from an enjoyment perspective. A lot of it's carried along by the relationship between Van and Yuna, which is adorable.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and it does have strong world building. Like you can tell a lot of effort went into this. Apparently, the novel series has been localized. Oh, apparently so
okay.
is the manga series. I just haven't ever seen it for sale anywhere.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's actually very characterful. Like you do get a really good sense of who Van is, and Yoon is
Yeah,
a 5-year-old, so there's not really a lot of character to explore necessarily.
yeah. She's adorable. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, right. It's actually kind of like to bring up another anime movie we reviewed. What was the name of that the imaginary friend one?
Uh, um, the Imaginary, is that it?
I think the imaginary is the name of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's kind of like the little girl in that one where we were like, how is she going to be the main character? She doesn't really have a whole lot to her. Oh, she isn't the main character.
yeah. Yeah. She
Oh,
spends the whole movie in a coma.
yeah, pretty much. Um, but yeah, so my only spoiler thought on this is that I kind of felt like they had a sort of naturalistic explanation for what was causing the wolf fever,
Yeah,
and I kind of how to put it 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 was like it was still clearly magical, but the actual mechanism for why the one side was immune to it was almost more naturalistic.
yeah,
And so it just felt kind of weird to me because what it turns out is that what makes you immune to the fever is drink is that the deer eat this particular type of clover which glows,
yeah,
and then if you drink the milk of the deer, you are immune to the plague.
yeah. So the doctor basically invented the this world's version of penicillin.
I thought it was more of like a vaccine because it's
Okay,
like
well maybe a vaccine. Yeah. Oh, that's true. I guess it was more of a virus than a
yeah,
bacterial infection.
right. He was watering down the blood of somebody else who was already infected. And I kind
Right.
of thought to myself, but the vaccine is unnecessary. Just start requiring everybody drink a certain amount of deer milk.
Yeah.
Uh,
Unless unless that would take too long.
I guess so. I guess once you're already infected, some deer yogurt or whatever probably wouldn't help you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Now, but at the same time, it's like, okay, this feels like an element from a book or a story that is trying to like debunk the supernatural nature of it. But then I remembered, oh right, no, the wolves are extremely supernatural, so the plant must also be supernatural. Because like
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of Scooby Doo mechanics you have. These wolves were just surrounded by this black mist, liquidy mist.
Yeah.
They were doing impossible things, but that
Yeah.
it's like that ending kind of fit, but it also just was like mildly unsatisfying, and that could just be my Western bias of science versus magic, where like maybe in this universe it's more of like a unitary whole where it's like, oh, there's we can apply the scientific method and learn more about magic. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just that again is just one thing that struck me as a little bit odd, but that's probably just I'm gonna chalk it up to just me being I'm going to chalk it up as a personal thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess.
And
Oh, go ahead.
no. Finish what we're saying.
No, I was about to transition, so
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I will say the ending I thought was a little confusing because I wasn't entirely sure what happened to him, what happened to Van, that
yeah,
he like
anime
transcended or
movies,
something. Yeah.
anime movies love Lady and the Tiger endings. I in fact, Your Name, the movie that this guy was involved in, was
Yeah.
had a similar sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.